Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about Enneagram Type 8s, and we're going to be looking at this book, The Unfiltered Enneagram by Elizabeth Orr, who is a self-proclaimed Type 8. So 8 on 8 action today. We're going to look at some of the quotes from this book. Look, I really do read these things. I do really read books. I love it. I love information. In fact, on my Clifton Strengths Finders, in my top 5 strengths are input and learner. So I like information. And I think information can be really helpful. And remember, as 8s, you have this connection to 5. You have this line to 5. Usually you go there when your action isn't working. But what if we went there intentionally and tried to get some good information so that we can make some better decisions about life? It might cause us to withdraw and slow down a little bit and process. And that's what our hope is today, is to give you some insights into your personality so that they don't trip you up and keep you from being able to move forward in life and move toward what you really want. So before we get started, just a reminder, in the description below is a link to my website, tomlahue.com, where I do offer Enneagram coaching if you're interested and you need somebody to talk to or somebody to help you process what's going on in your life. I also do marriage coaching, and I do have a lot of courses and stuff available on that website. Any way I can help you, please reach out to me. Feel free to email me or connect with me. I'd love to work with you. All right, so today's been a great day. And I realized I got to make this video right now or it might not ever happen. The right time is always right now for Type 7s. But let's jump into what she says about Type 8s, and let's see if we can find some interesting things to think about or some interesting things to talk about it. So we all know that the 8s are the challengers, the mavericks, the independents. The animal for the 8 is the bull, sometimes a bull in a china shop, you might feel like. You have to learn to restrain your superpowers sometime in order to be able to get along with other people, in order to have relationships with other people, because you're a very strong, lusty kind of person. And if you're an 8-wing 7, think about that. Lust mixed with gluttony. That's a lot. That's a lot. Okay. So, she says the 4-letter words are the love language of this Enneagram type. When I do coaching, I meet a lot of 8s, and it's interesting. Every once in a while, you'll meet an 8 that doesn't swear all the time. It's just interesting. Sometimes it does happen. Kind of the you might say the unicorn out there. All right, so 8s can be bullies, yes. Now remember, this is an 8 saying this, right? She says 8s at times can be bullies. My guess is maybe back in middle school or something like that, when you were figuring out who you were and you were going through that difficult time, that phase in your life, you might have been a bully. But a lot of times 8s are the ones that stop bullies. They're often the ones that stand up to bullies. 8s, 6s, 1s. I can see you guys all putting the bully down. Anybody that's misusing their authority or misusing their power, 8s are going to detect that. And you could be somewhere on that spectrum, the bully spectrum. Let's call it that. On the bully spectrum, are you the bully or are you the one that stops bullies? Interesting, right? And just because you're not in middle school doesn't mean you're not a bully. I mean, you could be a CEO of a company or a manager of a company or just a dad or a mom and still be a bully, or a pastor and be a bully. I got to have my way. It's interesting. The person that doesn't want to be controlled the most might end up trying to control everything. Trying to control their environment, trying to control the people around them, trying to control the situations. It's interesting that the person who doesn't want to be controlled could end up very controlling. Does it seem like this light's a little too bright? One of these lights is. I don't know. Light. Okay, where are we at? So, what else does she say? So cranking up the volume on their natural big energy to intimidate others and instigating arguments for sport. 8s kind of love intensity, right? And so one of the ways that you might see that intensity expressed is 8s kind of poking and jabbing, like drive-by conversations. Like you heard about drive-by shootings, somebody drives by and da-da-da-da-da. You could have 8s kind of sometimes drive by, hey man, did you see what they said about Trump? That's going to start an argument, right? That's going to start. It's like throwing a match into a powder. Okay. And sometimes just for the love of intensity. So instigating arguments for sport, fighting with as much intensity over pizza toppings as they do over issues of injustice. Whoa. My lighting. Okay. I may not win every battle with others, but at least they'll know I've been there. I may not win every battle with others, but at least they'll know I've been there. That's interesting, isn't it? Some people are like the opposite of that. Like nines right next to you. They don't want conflict. They don't want, all of that awkward, unsettled controversy from arguing and debating and fighting with people. At least they'll know I've been there. Intimidating, whether they intend to or not. Eights often really like that they have a reputation for being formidable. I'm not somebody to be messed with. You don't want to mess with me. Eights commandeer control over their environment by demonstrations of rebellion, delightedly disrespecting any prospective foes, and displaying open hostility toward any perceived constraints on their agency. In other words, you have a high locus of control, and you don't appreciate other people who seem to pretend as though they can control you, because clearly they can't. And the defense mechanism of eights is called denial. So yeah, they're not, might deny that other people can control you. You might deny that bad things could happen to you. I'm not the kind of person that's going to be a victim. That's never going to happen to me. It could just mean also denial, like that. I was just joking. I didn't mean that. Come on, I didn't mean that. I didn't do that. What are you talking about? Could be that kind of denial too. There's a nice thought. It's a nice thought that eights are a noble warrior. At your best, right? You're kind of a noble warrior. But she says that's more of a nice sentiment than it is often a reality. In fact, now, this is what she says. She says eights are often more like warthogs than they are like warriors. Warthogs. Okay. Now listen to what she says by that. Belligerent and neither polished nor good looking, warthogs have stumbled upon a unique combination of aggression and charisma and have adopted it as their survival strategy. Aggression and charisma. Interesting. More warthog than warrior. What do you think about that? Does that bother you? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Is it accurate? Shooting first and taking aim later. And so instincts tell me to move forward. Instincts tell me to take action. And so I'm going to start going forward even before I've necessarily figured out my plan or think about how it's going to affect everybody or how other people might feel. One of the good things for you to remember as an eight is the importance of pausing for a minute, slowing down, and then asking yourself a few questions like, is this my problem to solve? Does this problem require my action? Am I the one that should be leading this? Do I really want to sign up for this? Before I start just getting frustrated with everybody, deliberating on this and start moving toward action, do I really want to follow through on this? Is this something I really care about? Or am I just frustrated that we're just, stuck in committee phase and nobody's willing to take action? Is this my action to take? And how are my actions actually going to better the situation? Or how are my actions going to be perceived by others? Because, you could just be horning in and shoving in where you don't necessarily belong. So when it comes to challengers to decide, what to do, they tend to follow their truth. Where I think of ones as actually trying to align with truth. Eights, it's more like my instinct feels like the truth. So my truth is the truth. My reality is reality. And I want to, act accordingly to what I feel like is right, which we all do this, I guess. But she says something about be careful if you are with an eight that you don't try to flatter them or schmooze them, because eights, they have kind of a BS detector. They can see through your flattery. They're kind of looking at it like, what's your angle here? What are you trying to, how are you trying to manipulate me? How are you trying to position me or leverage me for your own benefit? And look, that really speaks to that sin of lust. If your sin is lust, you tend to see people and stuff as objects in your movie or objects in your drama that can be moved around. And you might project that out into the world. Like other people think that way too. They're just trying to do what's best for themselves. They're loyal to themselves. And so they're going to manipulate and use their power to abuse and oppress other people, to manipulate them for their own ends and purposes. And the reality is yes, sometimes people do that, but most of us, our sin isn't lust. We have our other problems, right? And it's cool that you can see through the fakery, and you probably would think of yourself as somebody who has a lot of discernment, and you probably do, because you can see through lies and deception. You can see through the fakeness or the phoniness when it's perpetrated in your environment. You tend to be able to read through that or see through that. Now, this is an interesting thought. I love this. This is fantastic. I had never heard anybody say this before, but she says, eights, the protector, which, by the way, like for an 8 to love you is really about protecting. Like if you don't protect people, then you don't really love them. If you don't protect them, if you're not willing to stand up and take a bullet for them, you're not willing to step in front of them in danger, then you don't really love them. So 8s often, connect the action of protecting with the concept of love, which is fair enough, which is great. Okay. But she says 8s are perhaps the most tender-hearted type on the Enneagram. What do you think about that? The most tender-hearted type on the Enneagram is type 8. Now, that's probably not something you're ever going to hear in a presentation. Like if you were to sit through an hour-long introduction to the Enneagram, you're not going to probably hear that type 8s, now they're the most tender-hearted. Look at you 8s out there. Yeah, tender-hearted little souls, little angels underneath. You're probably not going to hear that, right? You're going to think of type 2s as being very tender-hearted, very sensitive, right? And maybe a few other types. Sometimes 9s, and I don't know, maybe a couple of 4s, but you're probably not going to associate 8s with the concept of being tender-hearted. But it does make sense when you think about it. Why are 8s so protective? Why are they so protective of the ones they love? Do they think that the ones they love, are they very tender-hearted towards others? But let's all agree that there is an external shell around this tender heart, right? To protect this tender heart. And maybe the thickness of the shell might indicate the tenderness of the heart. You can sit and think about that one for a while, couldn't you? Is the thickness of your shell indicating the tenderness of your heart? Because you're a person, you're a human, you have feelings just like everybody else. I know you don't want to admit it because it makes you feel vulnerable. And 8s don't really like to show their vulnerability to others, but underneath there, you're just a little girl. You're just a little boy like everybody else. You have feelings. You have dreams and hopes and aspirations. And sometimes people don't really see that. They don't really treat you that way. They think, oh, they're tough. They can take it. I'll just be abusive to them. And it's amazing how many times I see 8s like the victims of an abusive relationship. You would think 8s are never going to be victims. It's not going to happen to me. And yet I will see sometimes it's uncanny. It's ironic that sometimes 8s, I can endure this. I'm strong enough. I'm tough enough. I can handle it. And it's like, yeah, but should you? Should you be handling this? Like if it was anybody else, they would have left a long time ago. But because you're strong and you can handle it and you can solve it yourself, there's no shame in reaching out to somebody for help. We all need support at times. Remember, you're a human being. Give yourself permission to be a human being. You don't have to always be a superhero. You don't always have to be the man of action, the action hero in the movie. Even the action hero at times needs, Robin or Tonto or somebody that is alongside of them to give them support and to sort of sometimes help them. Okay, so this is what she says about being tenderhearted. This is just a fantastic concept. And maybe it would take an 8 to know this. Maybe it would take an 8 to write this because the rest of us might not see this underneath. She says, they just have an abrasive, rough shell encasing that tender heart, which is then surrounded by an alligator-infested moat, which is then guarded by a fire-breathing dragon with a bad attitude of a teenager with embarrassing parents. Now, that's a vivid image, right? That's a vivid image of like this fortress. What is that fortress protecting? We all know about the fortress of an 8. Like they love you. It's like you're inside the fort. Don't turn against them. Don't betray them because they brought you inside their fort. What is that fort protecting? Interesting. Make you stop and think, right? And what she says it's protecting is a very tender heart. Okay. I had a little moment there. All right. So the essential state of an 8 is innocence. Innocence. How does that word affect you? Do you like that word innocence? Does it make you feel good, or does it make you feel a little bit ooey, a little bit yucky inside there? Innocence. Eights are drawn to innocence, like to protect it. Imagine somebody harming a child. Imagine somebody's trying to like do something awful to a child. You can see that 8 like, nope, nope, nope. And we've got to stop this, and we've got to take action, and we've got to protect. And so 8's that protective 8, is going to defend the defenseless. And 8s are drawn to innocence. And there may be a reason why. She says, the essential state of 8s is an innocent approach to each person and the world at large that senses truth in everyone and everything. And 8s at their best empower and protect that innocence. Unhealthy 8s are just concerned about being the one in power. Healthy 8s are empowering other people. They're empowering others, helping other people to realize you have the right to own your life. You have the right to change things in your life. If something isn't the way you want it to be, then get out there and take some action. Take some initiative. And 8s will just move to action and move with initiative, sometimes overpowering people, but I don't think it's intentional. But at your best, you empower other people to own their own life, own their space, and take action to improve their lives or to defend themselves. The core belief of an 8 is that people who hold power in the world will wield their influence with cruelty, exploiting and exercising control over those who have any vulnerability exposed. Now think about that. If you believe that, if that's your core belief, is that, you go out there in the world and what are you going to find? You're going to find corrupt people at the top. Now, maybe they didn't start out corrupt, but because they're in power long enough, they become corrupt. And so these corrupt people up at the top of the pyramid, they will exploit and they will manipulate and they will oppress all of the people under them that remain in a vulnerable state. So I can't be one of those huckleberries out there that gets exploited. I'm not going to be one of those ding dongs, one of those dum dums out there that just lets other people bat you around and do whatever they ain't got another thing coming. I'm not going to be one of those huckleberries that gets manipulated. So you got to keep your eyes open. You got to keep your chin tucked. And notice this defensive posture, right? Because we're projecting this sin of lust out into the world. It's like other people will take advantage of you. I've got a great book over here that probably, you would miss because it's written by Dr. Phil. And you might think, Dr. Phil, he's just a TV guy. But he's actually brilliant. And I think he's an 8. And Dr. Phil wrote a book that I've got called Life Code. Life Code. It's really good. Every 9 ought to read that book. Every 9-wing 1 should read that book. All of us should read it. But the whole book, it's a leadership book, but the whole beginning of that book, like the first third or fourth of that book is, let me tell you about all the people that want to rip you off. Let me tell you about all the people that are out there to manipulate you. Let me tell you about all the people in your life you need to identify and you need to push back on, you need to get away from. And that's very 8 thinking, is all of these people out there, they're all trying to get something out of you. They're all trying to pull one over on you. Everybody's in it for themselves. And, to some degree, he's right, and I think all of us need to be aware of that, but it's definitely the way 8 see the world. Now, look, that essential state is everybody's innocent. And that's kind of you, in the Garden of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, you're like, everybody's innocent. But the reality is like the way you actually see the world is no, they're not. No, they're not. You got to keep your eyes open because they will pull one over on you. And I'm not going to be the huckleberry that gets bounced around in their game. I'm not going to be the pawn in their game. And so I'll become formidable. And I'll start to push back. But here's the question, though. Sometimes that pushing back isn't called for. Sometimes that pushing back is a self-protective strategy that might push away people that really do want to love you and really do want the best for you. They're not trying to manipulate you. They're not playing enemy cards. They're trying to play friend cards, but you keep pushing them back because you need them to know that I'm not going to be anybody's tootsie in their game. I'm just making up words now. All right, so let me see here. This is great. She says, eights have an automatic orientation to fork around and find out. She says, they have that toward any person who is designated in charge, unless it's less that challengers need to be in control and more that they need to be, they need the person who is in control to recognize that I'm not going to be controlled by you. But in their ferocious defense of their agency, eights end up seizing control from everyone else and a monster truck rallying all over everyone in the arena, becoming the very domineering force that they were trying to avoid falling prey to. Boom! Wow. Do you hear what she's saying? She's saying that it starts out with you being in some group. You're invited to some group, right? Some ladies group. They're getting together, moms. We're a bunch of moms and we just want what's best for our kids. And we're going to create play dates and okay, so whatever. You join this moms group, right? And somebody who thinks they're in charge starts leaning in on you and you're like, whoa, yeah, nope, they're not setting my schedule. Whoa, yeah, they're not telling me when and what kind of snacks to bring. And so you start to push back so that this person who thinks they're in control doesn't think that they can control you. And if you're not careful, this could turn into a monster truck steamroll over everybody. And then you end up the one bossing everybody around, taking stuff out of people's hands, commanding other people. Remember, the speaking style of eights is commanding. So you start commanding and directing. And if you're not careful, you could become the very person that you're trying to protect others from being controlled by. You're now the control freak. And this is going to lead to what? 100% is going to lead to burnout. You're going to get exhausted because sometimes you are denying your own ability to be in control of everything. Do you really want to be in control of everything? Do you really want to control everything? No, you don't. You get exhausted by this. And you get exhausted from carrying the weight of leadership and responsibility. And you'll bite off more than you can chew. 100% of the time, you will bite off more than you can chew. Unless you start to realize your own limitations. And that requires some vulnerability for you to recognize, yeah, I just don't have the energy for this. I just don't. I can't be everybody's savior. You know, it's okay for you to not be everybody's savior. We already have a savior, so we don't really need you to also be our savior. I mean, it's okay to help people. It's okay to come alongside of them and empower them and encourage them, but you don't have to save everybody. Okay? All right. So the focus of your attention is on recognizing injustices and abuses of power by those who are in charge. Let's see. The core fear is that your vulnerabilities will be exposed. Because see what happens is if people find out that you're scared, or if people find out that you're tenderhearted in some way, then they could use that against you and position you in such a way that you could end up being manipulated and controlled. And that's your core fear. So you're very careful about what is vulnerability? It's all the stuff that makes you feel like a helpless child. Disappointment, I'm not in control of my environment, or apprehension and indecision because I'm afraid I'll make a mistake. What do you guys think? Does that make sense? That feels very vulnerable. Or even just like opening up and sharing things about yourself. Like, could you imagine sitting in a room full of strangers and saying, yeah, my name is Tom, and when I was a baby, I used to wet the bed. Yeah, well, my mom got real upset. And so, can you imagine like opening up? No, because if you tell people that kind of stuff, then they will leverage that against you at the right time to position you in such a way as to manipulate or to try to control you. So let's read what she says, okay? She says it better than I do. Eights are acutely aware of the tenderness and sensitivity that reside within them. Okay, so you know that there's this soft spot inside that's you, right? And they worry that their buried, gentle nature will become the Achilles heel that will take them down when it is discovered. And when they look around and see how many warm and receptive people are taking advantage of all these nines, for example, or these twos that everybody manipulates, when they see how the warm and receptive people are taken advantage of and manipulated by some selfish dingleberry, it makes sense that they would fear for their own sweet little hearts and their capacity for self-determination. I get it. It makes sense. It makes sense. So you kind of like step into this guarded, protective state, which will work for you a lot of the time. It really will. It'll move and push. It'll push all the cows off the railroad track. It'll push all the cows off the railroad track so that you can keep moving forward. But I imagine that it also has kind of another effect too. Like, do people really know you? Do they really know the real you? Are you ever able to open up with anybody? Is there anybody in your life that you trust enough? Even that word trust could probably be bothersome to you. 8s and 6s, do you trust me? Do you trust me? It's like, well, I did until you asked me if I trusted you. Now I don't trust you. But, is there anybody in your life that you trust enough that you can let your guard down a little bit? Wouldn't you like that? Wouldn't you like that? Wouldn't you like some kind of real friend or friends or a friend group in your life that you could open up to and talk about your marriage with? But if I let down my guard and I let them in, I let them know this has happened before. And then next thing you know, they're blasting it all over Facebook or they're blasting it all over text groups we do need each other, right? None of us are meant to be alone and isolated, and none of us can be that strong for that long. So anyway, it's just a thought, just a little bit of a challenge there. They can be brash and abrasive, protecting a tough, secure, and decisive persona, scaring off and filtering off all the spineless people who are, too weak to be relied on. Okay. Good stuff, man. So interesting. The defense mechanism is denial. A denial of your own vulnerability, a denial of your own limits or your own limitations, a denial of your own tenderness, a denial of the very real threats to your well-being. Well, it's never going to happen to me. How do we know it won't? Because it won't. Right? Denial of their interdependence on other people and their need for other people's support. Like to join the village. 8s are not good at being joiners. But, everybody needs a little village to belong to. And you don't always have to be the strong person in charge of that village. Sometimes you need the village to take care of you. Sometimes you need other people to take care of you. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And look, the more human you are, the easier it is for people to relate to you and to connect to you. And everybody wants to belong. Everybody wants to be a part of the group. Everybody wants to feel like they're loved and included, and so do you. But sometimes you can be too much for people. Let's face it. Let's be honest. Sometimes maybe your tactics, even the way you talk, it could be a little too much. So do you know how to when to restrain it? Restraining it is maturity. Knowing the difference between when you need to be strong and when you need to be open, knowing that difference, having that mechanism in place is maturity for you. Is knowing when you don't need, this isn't a fight. You can make it into a fight, but it's not a fight. You're seeing it through the lens of a fight, but it's really just a discussion, or it's really just an interaction, or it's a difference of opinion. Something a 9 would understand. This is just a difference of opinion. But that intensity, that disagreement, that lust for intensity could make you feel alive and electrified. It can make you feel defiant and strong and powerful. And you could kind of go into conversations prepared for battle when there wasn't going to be a battle, but now there is. And it just reinforces that. See, you got to fight for what you believe in. See, you got to fight for. It's like, well, you do now because you've turned it into a fight. Okay. Willfully rejecting your own limitations, pushing the limits. And again, to stay in this state for a long time was probably going to lead to burnout. And maybe you're burned out. You know what happens? 8s go to 5 and they withdraw and they just say, you know what, I'm done. I'm leaving this marriage. I'm leaving this job. I'm so out of here. I'm so done. I'm so sick of this. And then they get in a van and they drive off to Arizona or Alaska or somewhere, and they live on a horse farm, and they don't care if they ever see another human being again. Oh, Tom, you're being dramatic. Maybe, but I've talked to eights that are literally doing that, who are just done. They've just gone off the grid. Go to five. Become minimalists like a five. Independent, self-reliant. I don't need anybody. I don't need anyone. Everybody lets me down. And that's a very dark place to be, I think at your best, you look like a two. Who wants to be connected more than twos? Who's less connected than fives? And so one of the ways to know, am I leaning toward the two or am I moving toward the five, is tell me about other people in your life. Are you moving toward them to offer assistance, care, comfort, connection? Or are you moving away from people because everybody's stupid, Tom? Everybody's an idiot. I can't take it anymore. Mm. I love it. Instead of risking the vulnerability, that's what it's going to take to make connections. Eights stiff arm people. Not me. You're not going to get me. They stiff arm people who attempt to get close, rejecting before you get rejected, like fours. Eights are the living, breathing embodiment of the old saying, you can't fire me because I quit. I reject you first. Eights anticipate rejection. Eights are one of the relationship types. Eights, fives, and twos are in the relationship group. Twos move toward people for connection. Fives move away from people to see the relationship between ideas and processes. And eights move with people to overcome obstacles, to fight against injustice. But all of those relationship types are also called rejection types because you anticipate rejection. Twos, they're going to reject me, so I have to be nice, kind, and friendly. Fives, they're going to reject me, so it's fine, whatever. And then eights, they're going to reject me, so I'm going to not let them in. Push them out. They're probably going to reject me anyway. But maybe they won't. Maybe people don't want to reject you. Maybe people want to love you and connect with you. Got to keep the possibilities open. The boss, the tendency to take charge, appointing themselves to lead the team, even when maybe you're not the right person to do it. Eights have little interest in the quality or appearance or the outcome, and frankly, not giving a how their hostile takeover is received by anyone else. They take charge to avoid being subject to someone else's agenda. I've got to take charge because if I don't, somebody else will be in charge and they'll be thinking they can tell me what to do, and that's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. What do you want from me? Okay? They don't want to be governed by the values and rules of someone else, and it'll be a cold day in hell before they just surrender to someone else's lead without ensuring that they are in capable hands. But here's the problem, is the person steps up to take leadership, and you're going to grill them to find some reason. Do they pass this test? Are they really capable? Are they really competent? Are they really the person that could run and lead this thing? And then when they become that person, you might find yourself against them. And so this makes it difficult sometimes for people to work with you. It makes it difficult for, because can you be led? Can you be led by somebody who's competent but would do things different than you? Really? What if you came alongside that leader and then offered your superpower, your abilities alongside of them? But what you'll probably find is you'll just be fighting with that person who is the leader, because they're not doing it the way you would do it, or can you be a team player? Can you be a team player? A lot of eights are entrepreneurs because they can't be team players. Eights, what kind of life-giving things would you have energy for if you were able to cut back on all the hills you've been dying on lately? Wow. All right, one last thing here. Let's read one last quote. She says, to lay down your weapons is innocence, and to approach your perceived adversaries with your necks exposed, vulnerability. Innocence invites eights to trust your unguarded hearts to someone else, not to the reinforced walls you build, because you tend to seek protection or shelter in your own strength, power, and in your own will. But, there's a lot of protection to be found in relation with other people as well. And to be able to risk that, the rewards may be worth it. So, man, we appreciate your strength, power, courage, determination, your initiative, and we all need that voice in our lives. So be that voice. Be that voice that challenges others, that promotes others, that encourages others, that empowers others. Be that person that moves toward others, not away from them. Wow, good stuff. Thank you guys as always. I hope it's helpful and encouraging and challenging in some way. Love you guys, and the eights in my life I love. And thank you, and be present to life. I'll see you next time.